Guantánamo Bay, one of the most infamous detention centers in the world, a name synonymous with secrecy, controversy, and human rights violations. But under the Trump administration, it took on a whole new role, housing immigrants and asylum seekers detained under extreme deportation policies. Today, we're diving into the disturbing reality of how immigrants are being sent to Guantánamo Bay.
In 1898, the U.S. helped secure Cuba's sovereignty from the Spanish after nearly 4 months of fighting. After that victory, the U.S. had some conditions for withdrawing from Cuba outlined in the Platt Amendment. Some of the headlines from the amendment included the stipulations that Cuba could only transfer Cuban land to the U.S., they had limited rights in negotiating treaties, and they'd give the U.S. rights to a naval base, which became Guantanamo Bay.
During his presidency, Donald Trump made immigration the central focus of his policies, from the infamous border wall to the zero-tolerance policy that separated families. His administration implemented some of the most hard-line immigration crackdowns in modern history.
Now, Republicans and Democrats must join forces again to confront an urgent national crisis. Congress has 10 days left to pass a bill that will fund our government, protect our homeland, and secure our very dangerous southern border. Now is the time for Congress to show the world that America is committed to ending illegal immigration.
We have to set our country on the proper course. By the time the sun sets tomorrow evening, the invasion of our borders will have come to a halt, and all the illegal border trespassers will in some form or another be on their way back home.
It's a place where the lights stay on 24/7, where within those giant chain link cages, men, women, and children huddle together awaiting their fate. Caught crossing into the U.S. illegally and brought to this detention center in Texas for processing. Some call the place Ursula after its street address. Others label it in Spanish, La Perrera, the dog kennel. These images provided by the U.S. government show an orderly circumstance, but audio said to have been smuggled from one such center and given to the investigative journalism group ProPublica signals something more harrowing. Subtitled from Spanish by ProPublica, a voice said to be a Border Patrol agent then makes a joke.
Bueno, aquí tenemos una orquesta.
Such detention centers have become the focal point in an intensifying debate over how the U.S. now deals with illegal crossings. A new directive by the Trump administration, zero tolerance, is to prosecute all such migrants criminally, which means by law, parents and children must be separated.
In your first administration, you had the zero tolerance policy, where we did see family separations.
Yeah.
You ended it.
We don't have to separate a family.
This.
Excuse me, Kristen.
Yeah.
We don't have to separate families.
Yeah.
We'll send the whole family very humanely back to the country where they came. That way the family's not separated.
So no more family separations. You're not reviving the zero tolerance policy.
It depends on the family. The family may decide to say, I'd rather have dad go, and we'll stay here. And in which case they have that option.
But you're not going to revive your zero tolerance policy, which was put in place as a deterrent. Is there any universe where you would bring that back, sir?
We need deterrence. Look, ready? When somebody comes here illegally, they're going out. It's very simple.
Under Trump's leadership, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, ramped up deportations, targeting not only criminals but also undocumented and documented immigrants, including families and asylum seekers. No one is safe. Thousands of people are detained in facilities across the U.S.
Paul Burke says his daughter's current conditions at the Northwest Detention Center are deeply concerning, and she's been there for nearly 2 weeks. As they reach out to British leaders, they are asking for help in the States to help bring Becky back home. A desperate father in the United Kingdom opened this Facebook post on March 8th, saying his daughter, Becky Burke, had been on a 4-month backpacking trip when she was detained by ICE on February 26th. The cartoonist had been sharing her adventures on her Instagram account, where she stayed in Portland, then Seattle, before heading up to the Canadian border. Paul Burke says she was denied entry into Canada due to an incorrect visa, and when she tried to go back to the U.S., was refused re-entry and classified as a, quote, illegal alien. Burke's father says she was on a tourist visa, and her social media account shows she participated in Workaway, a cultural exchange, according to the Workaway website, that expects participants to help around 5 hours per day in exchange for food and accommodation. ICE confirmed Burke is still being held at the Northwest ICE Processing Center related to the violation of the terms and conditions of her admission. U.S. Customs and Border Protection says it can't discuss specific cases, only saying on background, quote, individuals who travel to the U.S. under the visa waiver program are not allowed to work for any type of compensation. That includes work in exchange for room and board.
Now to the crisis on the U.S.-Mexico border. Folks managing these migrant holding centers tell us the situation is a ticking time bomb. Tonight, there are new images from inside the center showing what the government calls dangerous overcrowding.
But as these centers become overcrowded, the administration took drastic measures relocating immigrants to Guantanamo Bay. That's right, Guantanamo Bay. The notorious military prison initially meant for alleged terrorists is now used as a detention site for immigrants. Away from public scrutiny and outside the mainland legal system, these detainees are placed in a legal limbo, unsure of their future. Why Guantanamo? For one, its offshore location allowed the U.S. government to operate outside many constitutional protections. Second, it had the infrastructure for indefinite detention. Reports suggest that immigrants, including asylum seekers, are held there under harsh conditions with limited access to legal aid.
It's the third flight of its kind, coming just days after 177 deported Venezuelan migrants arrived back home from Guantanamo Bay. Now we're hearing for the first time about the conditions inside the military base turned detention center.
De verdad que no pienso volver a salir de mi país porque quedé de verdad traumatizado con todo lo que pasé.
In an interview with our partner Telemundo, Kevin Rodriguez says he was detained in Guantanamo for 14 days. Now reunited with his family in Venezuela, he recalls spending days stuck inside a dirty 9-by-6-foot cell with little food, losing 9 pounds in 2 weeks.
In January and February 2025, the Trump administration began transferring detained migrants to Guantanamo Bay, marking the first time non-citizens have been held there. The American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, has filed a lawsuit alleging that these detainees are being denied access to legal counsel and family communication. The Department of Homeland Security disputes these claims, stating that detainees can contact their attorneys by phone. This situation has raised significant concerns about the legal rights of migrants and the transparency of their detention. The people sent to Guantanamo Bay have not gone through trials or hearings to ensure they receive due process before their detentions. In fact, the very essence of the Guantanamo situation is that detainees are often held indefinitely without charges or trials. These individuals, many of whom are migrants, are being detained without being granted access to the basic rights of due process, such as a trial by jury or the ability to challenge their detention in court. The ACLU and other organizations have been pushing for more transparency and legal access, but the lack of hearings or trials for these detainees has been a major point of contention. This legal black hole is exactly what many human rights activists are criticizing because it effectively circumvents established legal protections, keeping people detained with no clear path to justice or resolution. So, no, they're not getting their day in court before being sent there. It's a major violation of legal principles and due process.
Trump's administration used every legal loophole to justify this, citing national security and border enforcement. They treated immigrants as detainees rather than asylum seekers. This led to horrifying conditions, overcrowding, lack of medical care, and extreme psychological distress. Families were separated with no clear path to release.
Okay.
President Donald Trump wasting no time on his first day back in office, signing a series of immigration-related executive orders.
This is just absolutely ridiculous. We have very good grounds. People have wanted to do this for decades.
The orders include declaring a national emergency to deploy military personnel to the border, suspending refugee resettlement, and ending birthright citizenship in some circumstances.
Primarily mothers who are here to let our legislators know that we are not okay with what's happening. We don't want any more money going to those camps. The camps need to be closed. What's happening is inhumane. It's unacceptable.
The images are part of a Homeland Security Inspector General report released just hours ago. Observers went to 5 locations in Texas last month. They found adults packed into standing room only cells for up to a week. Others held for a month in these conditions, pressing their hands against the windows. They saw children with no access to showers and limited clothing.
I'm forced to separate them from their family and their attorneys and send them elsewhere throughout the country.
That means locals detained are often sent to facilities in Virginia, like Farmville or Caroline, or Moshannon in Pennsylvania if there's room.
It is supposed to be civil detention, but if you ever go to an ICE detention center, it is a jail. The living conditions are pretty rough. The food is not great. There's no privacy. There's very little contact with the outside world. It's overcrowded.
It was one of 4 facilities a group of U.S. senators called to be shut down last year due to, quote, well-documented, horrific conditions. The I-Team found a 2024 complaint filed by the National Immigration Project against Farmville involving allegations of use of force by guards, lack of access to sinks and toiletries, and overcrowding. The I-Team also found this inspection of Farmville from December, part of an ICE compliance inspection, which noted multiple violations, including incomplete mental health evaluations, irregular welfare checks for detainees on suicide watch, and lack of reporting for communicable diseases.
The Trump administration started using Guantanamo Bay Naval Station last month to hold immigrants who've been through court proceedings and are awaiting flights back to their home countries. President Trump has said he wants to expand detention there to hold 30,000 people, but that is an expensive plan, and it is also facing some legal challenges. Meanwhile, Maryland is saying that that's helping them to empty out some of these detention facilities. They can send them to Guantanamo Bay. They can stay there until they get flights out, and that allows them to put more people into these holding facilities in these areas outside of the state.
Human rights organizations sounded the alarm. Legal experts and activists condemned the practice, comparing it to the post-9/11 detentions of suspected terrorists. Lawsuits were filed and protests erupted across the country, but with Guantanamo being so isolated, transparency is minimal and the full extent of the detention remains unclear.
The U.S. has released 2 Pakistani brothers from the Guantanamo Bay prison after holding them without charges for over 20 years.
3 asylum seekers narrowly avoided being sent to Guantanamo Bay after being profiled as gang members. Their indefinite detention was stopped by legal advocates amid rumors of imminent transfers and a federal judge who intervened before the government could move them out of the country. Now, it's unclear if Trump is even legally allowed to send immigrants there, not that it's stopping him. Guantanamo Bay is located in Cuba, and legal precedent has only ever involved cases of people being detained outside of the U.S. and then being taken there. So is this a new precedent that people on U.S. soil could go directly there? This also violates the Constitution. Undocumented immigrants still have rights as long as they are on U.S. soil, like the right to due process. Take the 3 immigrants who could have been moved. They are currently detained in New Mexico, and if they were transferred to Cuba, how would their New Mexico lawyers get legal visitation? Travel and expense aside, there are significant legal hoops to get special security clearances to visit Guantanamo Bay. So if your lawyer can't get to you, how do you get out of Guantanamo? The White House has refused to release the names of those who are being sent, and reportedly almost all of them have no legal representation. With no transparency, there's no time to prevent this from happening. Trump has also hinted at holding people in Guantanamo Bay without plans for release, saying he doesn't want them in the US, but he also doesn't want them back in their home countries. This is illegal. You can't detain people indefinitely. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem has since tried to walk this back, but without a plan as to how this is going to be avoided. So Trump isn't detaining undocumented immigrants. He's trying to put them in prison. If you need even further proof, none of the arrivals have been taken to the so-called tent city being set up for them. They're all currently housed in the military prison.
What is also important to note here is that because it's on the naval base, it is extremely secretive. Migrants have been held at this ICE facility that is at Guantanamo. There's been no public oversight over the facility.
Chicago defense attorney Tom Durkin was one of 5 lawyers tapped to represent accused 9/11 attackers and says legal proceedings at the naval base are a sham.
These were designed to be show trials.
He says the Guantanamo detention facility has always been a lawless place, so it's no surprise to him that a president who he says has no respect for the law would be attracted to it.
Under President Biden, many of Trump's harshest immigration policies were reversed, and reports suggest fewer immigrants were sent to Guantanamo. However, the facility remains open, raising fears that future administrations could reinstate similar policies.
Congress needs to pass legislation this year to finally secure protection for dreamers. The young people who've only known America as their home. And permanent protection for immigrants who are here on temporary protective status who came from countries beset by man-made and natural-made violence and disaster. As well as a pathway to citizenship for farm workers who put food on our tables. Look, immigrants have done so much for America during this pandemic and throughout our history. The country supports immigration reform. We should act. Today I'm announcing a common sense fix to streamline the process for obtaining legal status for immigrants married, to American citizens who lived here for a long time. For those wives or husbands and their children who have lived in America for a decade or more but are undocumented, this action will allow them to file the paperwork for legal status in the United States, allow them to work while they remain with their families in the United States. Let's be clear, this action still requires undocumented spouses to file all required legal paperwork to remain in the United States.
I will declare a national emergency at our southern border.
Just sworn in, and President Trump signaled he's ready to issue a flurry of executive orders and directives. That includes a declaration of emergency on the border. Good evening, I'm Clarice Tinsley. The orders will reverse some policies from the Biden administration.
Guantanamo Bay has long been a stain on America's human rights record, but its use for immigration detention adds a new chapter to its dark history. Should this infamous prison finally be shut down for good? And how do we prevent such extreme policies from ever happening again? What do you think about the use of Guantanamo Bay for immigrant detention? Should the facility be permanently closed? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into critical issues. Until next time, stay informed.
The legal battle over the Maryland man mistakenly deported to a notorious prison in El Salvador is intensifying. A federal judge yesterday refused to delay a deadline for the Trump administration to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the U.S. The administration acknowledges Abrego Garcia, a green card holder, was mistakenly put on a plane to El Salvador with more than 200 alleged gang members because of an administrative error. But the Attorney General stands by deporting him.
ICE has testified, members of ICE, that he is an MS-13 gang member.
The judge says the government has given no proof that Abrego Garcia was a gang member.